and welcome to Coffee Break Blogging, where you'll learn to grow and monetize your blog in short, tactical installments you can use right away. Now here's the next episode in our series. Welcome back to another installment of Coffee Break Blogging, where this isn't just another podcast, it's a full course on building an online business based around blogging from scratch. My name is David Risley, and if you want to catch up with us from the beginning of this course, go to coffeebreakblogging.com and view the full archives. Okay, so let's get into our topic for today, which is pricing. Specifically, how do you figure out what price to charge? Now, in this episode, I am not going to be able to give you a specific dollar amount, obviously, but I do want to talk about some of the guidelines that go into determining your price and some things that you can keep in mind and also do specifically in the area of survey to start finding out what you can charge for your products, okay? The thing about pricing is that it can turn into kind of an emotional roller coaster to figure out what to charge for your products. You could be sitting there worried about what the competition is charging for something similar to what you're selling. You could be wondering about what happens if I price it too high and nobody buys it? Are they going to think that I'm being greedy here? And on the flip side, if you price it too low, are people going to think that the quality is bad? And so for this reason, pricing can be this weird mix of personal self-confidence, self-worth, but also prospect psychology and what other people are going to think on the receiving end, okay? So with this in mind, let's first talk about price and how it affects the perception of value of your product. Now, what I find out there, and believe me, I've done this too, is that they tend to undercharge for their own stuff. Now, one of the real reasons for this is because we tend to price our products based on our own feelings on the matter instead of putting ourselves firmly in the mind of our prospect. Here's the thing to keep in mind. I mean, we have to keep this viewpoint difference in mind here. You are the product creator. You are very intimately familiar with that product, with the material in it. The material of that course is probably old hat to you. You're so familiar with it. You don't even think it's all that special because you probably are surrounding yourself in that material day in and day out. Okay? Now, for that reason, your perception of value of that material is going to be like, whatever. Now, put yourself in the viewpoint of your prospect. They don't see that stuff every day. They still need it and they value it. They value the outcome that it can give them. Otherwise, they would not be a good prospect for you in the first place. So, if you price your product based on your own perception, then you could really easily make the mistake of aiming too low in your prices, okay? Now, let's look at the flip side of this, and that is going way too high in your prices. I've seen people do this too. I see it a lot in the consulting space or in some online marketers who come out and think that putting some really humongous price tag on something somehow makes them seem like a really big deal. I've seen people who offer a free phone call as a bonus on their product, and they're like, yeah, you'll get this free bonus call with me, and my hourly rate is usually $5,000 an hour. That's not even true. They probably never charged that much for their time in their entire life. So they're just making crap up. And I've seen it out there. I see some consultants who will they'll charge, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for service. And they don't even deliver all that much. It's almost like they think that it's just some weird thing that they've justified in their own minds to charge people what the benefits are worth, which is certainly legitimate, but they're not really backing it up with service that's actually worth what's being paid. And so they end up leaving a trail of people behind them that are just kind of pissed off because they are under-delivering and overcharging for it. I've seen SEO companies do this, by the way, where SEO, people will go and hire this SEO company to get them up in the rankings in Google, and they charge, in many cases, fairly high rates for that. But in reality, they're not really doing all that much, and they're just sitting there telling you, yeah, it takes its time. You got to be in this for the long haul, whatever. So there is a risk of going too high as well. And you might be able to get some people to pay it, but if you don't actually deliver some real goods for that's worth what they're paying, you're going to leave a trail of disappointed, unhappy people behind you. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Okay. So instead of making this a lesson in how you can screw it up, though, let's talk about how you can get it right. So first, and I just mentioned this before, the first thing I want you to keep in mind is that people do buy the benefits. They don't necessarily buy the features, okay? Now, like I said, some people, they go and they overcharge, in my opinion, because they keep that particular piece of information in their mind. They're like, well, the benefits of this are so large that I'm just going to charge a massive amount of money for this. And there is something to that, but only if you truly back it up with some real delivery. If all you're doing is having a couple of phone calls with them and you're charging them like $5,000 for that, you're screwing them. I don't care how you've justified that, you're screwing them, okay? But it is true that people are buying an outcome, and your product itself is just a medium for delivery of that outcome. And so for that reason, the price really does need to be set according to the benefits of that outcome that they're going to get. If you set your price based on the features, it's really easy to get it messed up. You might be looking at your product and think it's not that big. You might think it's just not big enough to justify a higher price point. You might think, well, it's just like 10 or 20 videos. It can't possibly be worth $500. And you can play a mind game on yourself, but it's because, again, you are pricing it based on your own viewpoint. You are intimately familiar with the material, and so it's easy to look at it just from the perspective of how big that product is, what the features are, but you need to instead value it based on the value that your customer is going to get from it, okay? Now, if I could turn around and deliver a really solid course that would be guaranteed to make you $100,000 in the next year with your blog, what do you think that would be worth? Even if it was a course which only consisted of a few videos, the benefits of that information would be very, very high. I also know that the more the person pays, the more invested they will be in actually doing the work to get the outcome. So if I set the price simply on the fact that it was just a few videos, I would be shortchanging myself and making it less likely that the customer would get the result. Okay? So you got to ask yourself, what are the real tangible benefits of your offer? What impact will it have on their lives? What are the benefits of the benefits? Okay? This is all good stuff to know when it comes to your copywriting, but it's also very important to know when you figure out what to charge for it. Okay? It's a really important point. Now, let's go into the next aspect of pricing, and that is to start literally asking your audience what they'd be willing to pay. Okay, now how do you go about doing that? How do you go about asking people what they'd be willing to pay? If you just simply come out and ask them, hey, I'm looking to sell this, what would you be willing to pay me for it? You're going to have some people that be like, nothing, because, the thing is, their shields are... The shields go up. It's just a blunt question. They're not going to give you an honest answer to it. And like we've already talked about on this podcast, the only true test for a product is them actually paying for it. It doesn't matter what they tell you. They could tell you, yeah, I might pay $100, but when the push comes to shove, if they haven't actually paid you the $100, it doesn't matter a hill of beans what they tell you. Okay. So what we need to do is find a way to get them to name their own price without actually getting them to do so. Okay, now how do we do that? How do we play that one? Well, it comes down to how you survey them. We want to survey people, but we want to do it in a strategic way so that we can get the information that we want, but in a way that they don't put their shields up. Okay, now a couple of questions that you could ask would be, what would you expect to pay for this? And now another one would be, if you were offering this product yourself, what would you charge for it? Okay? Now, the idea with these questions is that we want to get their viewpoint on what the product is worth, but we want them to remove themselves from the equation of being the buyer, okay? That's the idea behind it. We want them to think objectively about it, but not have any of the emotional baggage attached to it that might automatically and reactively come in because they're putting themselves in the position of being asked for money, okay? So that's how we do it. What would you expect to pay for this? Or if you were offering this product yourself, what would you charge for it? Okay, that puts them in the position of the seller. Okay, now a completely different approach would be to ask them questions that gauge their personal buying habits on other products. And the reason we do this is because we want to find out essentially how liberal are they with their money. Okay, that's really what we're asking for. Now, a very common question that you could ask that would get to this would be, how many times do you eat out during an average week or an average month? Now, the reason for that is simple. If somebody has more money and they're a little bit more freewheeling with their money, they probably would go out and eat more often. They eat out more often. You can ask them other questions that are, do you subscribe to the, websites out there? How often do you go out to, I don't know, just come up with some questions that are going to gauge out their buying habits on things that have nothing to do with your product. Okay? Essentially non-essential things. That's what we're really looking for. Now, the point would be to get a gauge of their level of spending. Plus, you can equate your price point later to these items that are very real to them and put it in perspective. So an idea of a way of doing that would be, this product is going to only cost you the average cost of one meal out. Okay? If you've done surveys on people and you know that your audience on the average eats out once a week, you know that that's an amount of money that they don't really miss that much. And so if you come in later by knowing that in your sales copy and say that this product is going to cost you on the average of one meal out, and then on top of that, you back it up by saying all the long range ROI that they're going to get from this versus that meal out that they really, don't get any ROI from, you could put it in perspective. Okay. And that is a great way to do that. Now, another way to do this is a system out there called Van Westendorp's price sensitivity meter. Now, this is not something that I made up. It was some guy named Van Westendorp. You can actually look this up on Wikipedia. But what this is essentially a marketing technique used to create, to determine price sensitivity. Okay. Now, it can be done via 4 different questions. The first one is, at what price would you consider the product to be so expensive that you would not consider buying it? Okay, so this question is designed to find out what the extreme zone is on the expense side. How high is just too damn high? Okay, now the next one down, or next all the way to the other end, would be, at what price would you consider the product to be priced so low that you would feel the quality just couldn't be very good? Okay. Now, at that point, we're trying to find out at what zone are people thinking, well, this thing must suck because it's so cheap. Okay. So those are the 2 extremes that we would want to weed out. Okay. The third question would be, at what price would you consider the product starting to get expensive so that it is not out of the question, but you would have to give some thought to buying it? Okay, so what we're doing here, we're kind of getting into the gray zone of it being too expensive. We want to find out, we want them to be in that range where it's a little pricey, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. They might have to think it over a little bit. And generally, we want to find out what that price range would be. Okay, now go take that same thing, the mirror image of it, and that brings us to the 4th question, which would be, at what price would you consider the product to be a bargain, a great buy for the money? Okay. And that gives you the idea, the area where they don't consider it too cheap that they think it's going to suck, but they're looking at it and go, wow, this is a really valuable thing. And this is a good deal. You want to know those 4 ranges, and that gives you a really good solid idea of how you can price things. Okay. So with questions like these, you could even use little number sliders in your survey system and have them kind of range the little sliders around, and you're just getting their feedback. And then you sit back and you look at the average and you see where these ranges fall for your audience. Okay. Now, last thing I want to mention here is comparing to your competition. This is definitely something that you need to do when it comes to pricing out your products. You need to go out and look at what similar competing products are priced at, because your prospects are probably going to be looking. Okay, we want to know what they consider to be average. Now, a good example of this to show you why it's important would be the book. Okay, now you're very familiar with books, especially hardbound books. You go to the bookstore, and the average price for a hardbound book tends to run in the $30 range. Okay, for a hardbound book. Okay, so in that particular market, if you come out for, again, it looks like a standard hardbound book, but you were charging $100 for it, then it would be an outlier in that particular marketplace. And there's a good chance actually that people are going to dismiss it because it just costs way too much. Now, on the flip side, you might spark a little bit of curiosity. They might be going, why does it cost so much? And that can actually work to your benefit from a marketing perspective, but you get the idea. You need to be aware of the different data points of pricing in your market. And if you're going to go way outside of that, you've got to have a really good reason to do so. Otherwise, you run that risk of people just falling on those two ends of the price sensitivity meter where they think it's either way too expensive and just bullcrap, or they think it's way too cheap and it must really suck, okay? So that's something you really need to do. You need to go out and look at your competing products in the marketplace, find out what kind of prices, it's kind of like in real estate. If you were buying a home, the one thing the real estate agent will always do is pull up comps. They want to know what other homes in that neighborhood have sold for recently. Very, very important information. And the same thing happens when it comes to our products on the internet. So go out, take that time, and maybe record that information in a spreadsheet and give you an idea where other people are pricing. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to just aim for the middle of that range. It's just that you need to know what the market expects. And if you're going to go above that, just do it with a good reason, okay? That way you can justify that price, okay? Now, in this idea of justification of price, I'll make one final comment. And that is that you need to compete on quality of the product, not on price. I talked a few episodes ago about when the right time is to shoot for low prices. And that right time for low prices is when you're in customer acquisition mode. You're trying to get people into the funnel and have them take that first step. But you don't want your business to depend on those low prices, okay? When it comes to charging respectable, even high prices, you want to not say, well, let me undercut my competition. You want to compete on quality. So if you have a particular price point in mind, you design the product and the benefits of that product in such a way that it actually matches, if not surpasses, the price that you intend to charge for it, okay? That's a much different way of thinking about it than you create a bunch of videos, what have you, and then you try to figure out what kind of price you can get away with. That's really not the right way to be thinking about it. You want to design the product to match the price that you would like to charge, okay? But you got to keep in mind what the average price point is in your particular market, and you need to know that information, okay? So, went a little long on this one, but I gave you a lot to chew on here when it comes to how to figure out what kind of price to charge for your products. Hopefully that was helpful to you, and I really encourage you to put it to use. Now, I want to make one quick mention here at the end because we were talking about survey questions and things like that. I have an action plan inside the Blog Monetization Lab called the Smart Survey System, and it's definitely something that I recommend that you check out, especially if you're already a lab member. But if you're not a lab member, might be one of many reasons why joining the lab today might make a lot of sense for you. The Smart Survey System action plan is designed to walk you through how to create surveys designed to get the information that you want, okay? And pricing is part of it, okay? Because that's something that people struggle with. How do you find out what my audience will pay without just coming out and asking them and looking like a doofus for doing it? So it's covered in that action plan, but the use of survey and other elements of the business is also covered all inside that one action plan, the Smart Survey System. So if you want to learn more about the Blog Monetization Lab to get access to that plan, head on over to blogmonetizationlab.com to learn more. Okay, I'll see you on the next episode of Coffee Break Blogging in a few days. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to this episode of Coffee Break Blogging. If you like what you heard here today, we have something awesome we'd love to send you. It's called the Blog Conversion Guide, and it has 9 tweaks you can make to your blog in order to increase your conversion rate to get more opt-ins and sales. As one of our listeners, we'd love to give you access to this guide absolutely free. You can get your copy right now by going to coffeebreakblogging.com. Again, go to coffeebreakblogging.com to get your copy, and we'll see you next time.